Hello and welcome to session 4 on Saturday, the 2nd of October of our Women-Ed Global Unconference. It's been great so far, and we've got a brilliant session now coming up called Daring to be Different. It's one I feel very passionate about, feeling very different myself, and we've got a really great lineup. So we've got coming up being a visible LGBT school leader with Jerry Robinson. It's coming up after Vivian and I have introduced the slot. And then we do have a slight change to the schedule. So Ruth is unfortunately unable to be with us. So hello to Ruth, though, if she watches the recording of this. Caroline Verdant is going to come on a little bit earlier. And then we're having an extra session with Liz Free, where we're going to talk about 15% poorer, and she's going to talk about the gender pay gap. And then we've got being a department head from underrepresented groups, challenging invisibility, being who you are, and then close at 19:45 UK or time. So Vivian, have I mentioned everything I need to mention before we hand over to Jerry?
Just our mentee questions. We've asked for questions of everybody at the Unconference over the whole weekend about ways we can disrupt and innovate and change. So we'll put it into the chat, but you go to Mentee, put the code in, and you've got the whole weekend or this whole session to answer the questions. I'll put that in the chat, Jules.
Great, thanks, Vivian. So, Jerry, we'll hand over to you. Absolutely delighted you've been able to join us and very excited to hear your session. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Hopefully people can see the screen. I have put a few slides together, but that's just really to give a little bit of extra information. So I'm speaking today about the importance of being a visible LGBTQ plus school leader, and I'm speaking from my own personal perspective about how that's impacted my school career, but also how it could influence others. So just a little bit of information about me. I'm the executive head teacher of Haringey Learning Partnership, which is a network of alternative provision schools and services in North London. I was formerly a head of a large mainstream secondary school, so I've kind of been on both sides of the system, both in AP and mainstream. And I have worked in education for over 20 years, starting my career in Newcastle, which is where I'm from. And during that time, I've been a member of the LGBT Ed Advisory Board, but also was part of the early education steering group for a charity that was set up called Diversity Role Models, which many people are probably aware of, which is a charity which is designed to take role models into schools, sometimes in the absence of visible LGBT role models in the schools themselves. I was very proud to be the first London secondary school to win the Stonewall Gold Award. And I think most importantly, and the reason why I'm speaking today is because I've always been visible as an educator. And I've never really had to come out in school. I've never really had to out myself. Maybe it's the DMs or maybe it's the haircut, I don't know. But people do always assume that I am gay, and therefore it's not something that I have to do. It's not something that I've ever really been able to hide. It's not, it's not a choice for me. But I am aware that for many people it can be more difficult to come out, and not everybody is out in schools, and sometimes with really good reason. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the reason why I think that is, why not everyone is out in schools. And I'm just going to refer to a couple of surveys that have been done in recent years. So the first one was done by the NASUWT, one of the unions, in October 2020. And I think that the statistics actually are quite shocking, that only 48% of the respondents to the survey said that they felt comfortable to be out in their workplace. And that's right across from primary and secondary schools. So almost half of LGBT teachers said that they didn't feel comfortable. And 23% said that they felt that they were the only staff who challenged homophobia, biphobia and transphobia in schools when they came across it. And then if we look a couple of years prior to that, to the last Stonewall School report, which was in 2018, at that time, 18% of LGBTQ plus teachers said that they had received homophobic, biphobic or transphobic comments from colleagues. And that's not including the comments that they might have received from students in their schools, from parents and carers, but this is from colleagues in the schools that they're working in. And then again, quite a shocking statistic in many ways, that 33% of LGBTQ plus teachers don't come out at work. And the reason that they say that they don't come out of work is for fear of discrimination. I'd argue that that's part of the reason. I don't think it's the only reason that people don't feel comfortable being out and comfortable being visible as teachers or leaders. So just thinking about some of the things that do get in the way of being a visible LGBTQ plus teacher or leader. One, I think, would certainly say is the fear of reaction of parents and carers. And there've been, some very high profile cases in the media, thinking about the No Outsiders campaign and Andrew Moffat, and then the protests that happened outside of the schools. I think, like many LGBTQ plus leaders, I've sat in meetings where parents and carers have been outwardly homophobic, and I've had to challenge that, and there has been a reaction. The fear of not being supported by colleagues, and if we look back at the surveys that I just went through, I think that's a very real fear. If we're talking about 18% of LGBTQ plus teachers having experienced homophobic, biphobic and transphobic comments from their colleagues. Governors, often not talked about, but a fear of not being supported by governors, that governors' perception might be that actually being out as a leader has no place in their school. And I think part of that is that sometimes when you are an openly visible LGBTQ plus leader, you can be labelled as having a gay agenda. I think many of us might have heard that before, and that why are you on this platform? Why do you have to talk so much about homophobia, biphobia and transphobia? And then sometimes you're only recognised for the work that you do around challenging homophobia, biphobia and transphobia. Sometimes I think people just don't know how to come out. I'm not, somebody who, although there are people who have, but I'm not somebody who kind of came out in a big school assembly. Like I say, it's something that people have always just assumed about me, and I've been, comfortable to be myself in schools. But then also, I think we have to acknowledge that being a teacher and being a leader is incredibly stressful, huge amount of pressures in different ways, and actually having to then deal with the thought of being discriminated against is just another thing that actually is too much for some people. And of course, lots of people have their own personal reasons for not being out and not being visible in school. And, this is what I'm talking about today, is in no way saying that everybody who is LGBTQ plus should be out in their school place. It's not right for everybody, but I'm talking about my own experiences and why I think it's valuable for me personally. Obviously, we've got the wider context of rising anti-LGBTQ plus sentiment, and we've heard a lot in the media over recent years, which would be enough to put anybody off being visible in their school workplace. But I think all of these relate to kind of one overriding point, which is at the bottom here, which is the legacy of Section 28. And I think it's really important to highlight that all of these in some ways come from Section 28. And I'm going to speak a little bit more about Section 28 now, because it always strikes me how many times I still get people coming to me, often people who are not from the LGBTQ plus community, asking me about Section 28, what it is, what was it, and actually not knowing very much about it. But as somebody myself my entire education was under Section 28, as a child, I trained as a teacher under Section 28, and I began my teaching career under Section 28. So it's cast a long shadow over what I've done as a school leader. So Section 28 was a local government act from 1988, which said that local authorities should not promote homosexuality. And it was deliberately vague, and that left lots of people with lots of question marks and lots of fear, because actually, even to just be out could be deemed by some as promoting homosexuality in the school case. And it was clearly summarised by Margaret Thatcher, who spoke just before its launch, saying that actually children who need to be taught, children who need to be taught to respect traditional moral values are being taught that they have an inalienable right to be gay. All of those children are being treated at a sound start in life. And actually, the figures from the time around when Section 28 came out showed that about 75% of the UK population was in support of Section 28. So when I say that my own education, my own teacher training, the beginning of my teaching career was all under Section 28, an act that was supported by 75% of the population, in some ways it might leave people's question, well, why would you be visible and why would you be out? But this is exactly the reason why. And I think back to my own school experience, my own childhood, there were no visible LGBTQ role models where I grew up in Newcastle. I didn't know anybody who identified as being gay or bi or trans, not a single person. Obviously, there were LGBTQ people in my community, in my school, but not a single one of those people was open or out or felt comfortable being themselves. So I grew up not really understanding what it was to be gay and not really understanding my own identity. And that's had an impact on me, I think, really for the rest of my life. When I think back to my childhood, this is what I saw in terms of representation around LGBTQ people. Either it was fear, and I still remember the leaflet, AIDS Don't Die of Ignorance, coming through the door of our house and being discussed by my family. And then there were the people that we would see on TV who almost universally were white men who were, mocked and characterized in a way. So being gay was something either to laugh at and make fun of, or something to be really scared of. And like many, many people, 75% of the UK population supported Section 28. Like many people, I grew up in a very homophobic household. I remember repeatedly my dad telling me that all gay people should be shot. And so as a young person and not having any visible role models, not ever meeting a real life gay person or knowingly meeting a real life gay person, and only having this idea that being gay was something to be scared of or something to laugh at, left me with lots and lots of questions about my own identity. And that did have a significant impact on my own mental health. And between the ages of 18 and 22, I was quite unwell. And I do think that Section 28 had a lot to answer for. So at the root of everything I do now really is to think about not wanting young people of today to have the same experience that I had as a child. So what do I do today? As I said, I'm an executive head teacher of a network of alternative provision schools, Haringey Learning Partnership, and I'm really proud to be part of a really inclusive school community. And what we do at HLP is rooted around a set of shared values, and those values really are that everybody has the right to be themselves, that we shouldn't be tolerating anyone, we should all be celebrated. And that's, you can see our shared value there, that we celebrate diversity, we value kindness, and we challenge prejudice. And that really underpins absolutely everything we do as an organisation. Every policy is informed by that, every decision that we make. And I think that it's really important that those values, and I've said this before, and it's not my quote, it comes from other people, but the values in schools, we quite often see them on posters stuck around the walls. But I can confidently say that at Haringey Learning Partnership, that our values are lived, they're not just laminated, and they do inform everything we do. And they do inform everything we do so that young people don't grow up, as I did in the 1980s and 90s, really questioning my place in the world because I didn't see anyone who I could identify with at all. So what does it look like in practice? You can see Kayla there, who's very, very proud of the post that she did. And Lady Phil then made contact with her, which she was incredibly proud of. And we worked really hard to build an LGBTQ plus inclusive school. We celebrate LGBT plus History Month. It's really important, but we make sure that it isn't just about that month, that this is some work that we're doing all year round, that our shared values, like I just said, are lived and not laminated. Our students really lead the work that we're doing. We have a number of colleagues, a number of members of staff who are visible LGBTQ plus role models, and that's an individual choice, no pressure would ever be put on anyone. But a lot of our staff have actually applied to work with us as an organisation because they know that this is an organisation that they will be supported and that they can be comfortable being themselves. And you know, if you can't be proud of yourself and your own identity, then you're never going to be the best teacher or leader. It's embedded, the work around challenging homophobia, biphobia, transphobia is embedded in our curriculum, not just about challenging prejudice and discrimination, but also celebrating the contribution of LGBTQ plus people in society. And we've looked very much at our local history. Haringey has a very proud tradition. In fact, one of the boroughs that really stood up with Bernie Grant against Section 28. We work with other schools to share good practice, and we work with organisations like Diversity Role Models, Educate and Celebrate, Stonewall. And there is an absolute challenge by everyone, staff and students, to challenge homophobia, biphobia and transphobia. And I think, you know, the reason why I do this, like I said before, is that at the heart of everything that we do, this is about everyone's rights to be supported and included. And I'm not saying that it's easy. It is far from easy. In fact, as in my own personal experience, I've experienced homophobia throughout my career in many forms and from many different groups of people. And that could be a reason to say, don't do it. Don't be a visible LGBTQ plus leader. But actually for me, it's just really deepened my resolve to continue to do the work, because it's evidence every time somebody's homophobic, or every time somebody makes a judgment, or every time somebody talks about me having a gay agenda, which has happened plenty of times, it just makes me realize that this work is far from done, that we still have a long way to go, so that every young person can truly be themselves, be happy, be confident, and then achieve the best that they can possibly achieve. And it's, you know, a little bit cliched, but it's always a quote that I come back to, and I put it just on the screen here, that if we can, and we can't always, but if we can, we should always, as school leaders, try to be the person that we needed when we were younger. And I certainly, as a young person, would have absolutely benefited from having a visible LGBTQ plus teacher, and a recognition that actually who I was okay, and actually, you know, that I could be proud of myself, which I definitely wasn't at the time. And so that's really what I've got to say. If you can do it, stand up, be proud, because it will make more difference than you can ever imagine to young people in your schools. And that's all from me. But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Jerry, thank you so much. That was a brilliant session, and I just wanted to have a look at some of the chat comments for you. Absolutely be the person that we needed when we were younger. I think that's really a couple of people have said that, absolutely. But also I was really interested in your comment about how staff want to work with you because they know you're inclusive and you know that they'll be accepted. So I think that's a really interesting one for recruitment, isn't it, as well as our young people?
Yeah, and it's actually been really, I think, something that has taken me by quite a lot of surprise, because both in my current organisation, in my previous school, we had a number of people who would come to interview. And in the interview, we would always ask the question, why do you want to work? at my previous school, or why do you want to work at Haringey Learning Partnership? And I would say almost 8 or 9 times out of 10, people will say, because what I know about your organisation or what I know about your school is your values and what you stand for. And I'm really impressed by that work, and it's something that I want to be part of. And, you know, not all of those people are LGBTQ+, and not by any means, but they're people who identify with the need for this work. They're people who recognise that actually the work that we do to make sure that young people feel comfortable, but the staff also feel comfortable, because, you know, our staff are going to be the best they can possibly be when they feel comfortable and proud of who they are and feel they can be themselves in the workplace and they're not scared of discrimination. And so, yeah, it's overwhelmingly the case that people who come to interview will say that's one of the reasons that they want to apply to work at HLP.
Which is a message in itself, isn't it? Jill Berry's on saying, and I remember too, Jill, I remember section 28 and its repercussions so vividly. Teaching in the 80s certainly had its challenges. I know we still have a long way to go, but we have come a long way since then. I think younger teachers would be shocked to know that we all taught under section 28, wouldn't they, Jerry?
Yeah, and it's that thing of going to school under section 28. You know, nobody ever talked about being gay. And now when I come back, you know, I make my own assumptions about some of my teachers, but they were never ever out. And now, you know, then teacher training, again, I was aware of section 28 then. Going into my first few years of my teaching career, section 28 was still there. But even when section 28 went in 2003, the legacy was still there. So it still cast a shadow, really, over many, many years to come, and still does, in my opinion. I think we have come a long way, but there is still a huge amount of work to do.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I liked that slide when you said about the legacy, because that's how I think damaging such policies can be, aren't they? And you know, we might see some at the moment that we've got that damage, that, or even they will change later on, are quite damaging for many years to come.
I mean, in the previous school, we were one of the schools that campaigned for the first rainbow crossing outside of the school. It was totally student-led, student leaders who campaigned for it. And I think it's telling that in the kind of weeks after that crossing went down and was shared in the press, we had over 300 complaints direct to the school, all rooted in homophobia. And so whilst I think, yes, it is important to say that we've come a long way, I think it's really clear, and those 300 complaints showed that loudly and clearly. There is still a huge amount of work to do. Yes. And that's why, you know, I think we do need visible LGBTQ plus.
Yeah. And you talked about you mentioned Andrew Moffat, I think, didn't you? Just very briefly, and I think his work has been extremely important in that, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. No, there are some people doing some great work, and I think the more we can connect and work together, the better.
Are there any connections you'd like, but if people are interested in listening, are there any places they can go to? You talked about LGBT Ed. Is that somewhere they can go to if they want to find out more?
Yeah, I think there are a number of different organisations, but I mean, the ones that I know the best, I think I won't talk about ones that I don't know as much about, but there are others. I Educate and Celebrate. I think they're doing some great work. Really recommend schools getting involved. Dr. Ellie Barnes, who's leading Educate and Celebrate. There's also Diversity Role Models. Again, done some brilliant work of bringing LGBT plus people into schools, which has made a huge difference for lots and lots of young people. Stonewall and the Stonewall School Champion Awards have been really important. I think Stonewall have taken a really appropriate stand against transphobia as well in schools. And LGBT Ed I mentioned as well, because I think talking more about our role as teachers and leaders in schools, and I think that's really important, that we can focus on the work that we do with young people, but also thinking about how we support each other as professionals in schools as well.
Fantastic, thank you. I wanted to finish on a comment that Adele has put. Jerry really is doing great things at HLP with our young people in Haringey. Her and her staff have made it such a successful Prue. There is always such great things on their Twitter feed celebrating their brilliant young people. So it's a nice fitting finish to the impact and change you are making. Thank you, Jerry.
Yeah,
can I just add in there, because I always love retweeting your tweets as well, Jerry. You're kicking off our section on daring to be different, and it couldn't have kicked off in any better a way. So thank you very much for starting us off this evening.
Thank you, Vivian.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Jerry.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Well, what a great start to daring to be different. And we were going to have Ruth now, but she was unable to come. So brilliantly, Caroline Verdon has come in and come into her session earlier. So hello.
Hi.
Great to have you.
Good.
Thank you for coming.
That's
so
fine.
I'm going to introduce you. You're being a Black woman in society and setting boundaries. That's right. That's a brilliant title. I'm very excited to hear. So Vivian, is there anything you'd like to say, or should we just let Caroline get on with it?
Now, just to say thank you again, and I cannot wait. I've been so excited that you've joined us today after quite a bit of persuasion along the way.
Oh, I'm really pleased. You're such a positive force on Twitter as well.
Absolutely.
You kind of you radiate positivity. It's wonderful.
I try. I do try.
So looking forward to it, Caroline.
Thank you. How should I share my screen?
You should be able to just, if you go to share screen now, you should have authorization to share your screen. I'll stay on until.
Okay, let's see how I'm going to do it.
There's a little button at the bottom that should say share screen.
Can you see my screen?
Not yet. Sometimes takes a while.
Hang on.
Hold on.
No, Jerry stopped sharing now, so you should be able to.
I can't. Can you make Caroline a co-host, Jules?
Yes. Oh, I did allow all the panelists to share.
Can you see it now?
No.
Right, let's go back.
When you press share, do you have a couple of screens come up of a couple of different?
Yeah, I do, but I can't find my PowerPoint. It's actually in a PDF.
If you like, if you could send it, you can, if you pop it to Women Ed, I could possibly share it for you that way.
Oh, I actually thought this would have worked. Yeah, I just downloaded it and it's not coming up. I don't know why. We got it now?
Liz, you're on mute. I think.
Sorry, in the interim, I just think we had Palm turn up and she's doing a walk to keep us kind of a nice little interlude whilst we're trying to get the screen sorted.
Well, I don't know if we want to, now you're here, Liz, if we want to do a swap and give Caroline a bit of time to download her presentation, and you and Jules could have your conversation. Would that help, Caroline?
Yes, please.
Okay,
Right.
and then Caroline, worst case scenario, if you email it to the Women Ed address, I can share it for you.
Okay, fine. I might have to
but
do that.
yeah, okay then. All right then. Thanks. We'll see you in a bit.
Shall I stay on here?
If you just turn your video and mic off.
There we go. Right. So we'll have Caroline actually at her scheduled time, hopefully when we can share the screen. So now this is a slightly impromptu session, but I think absolutely vital that we talk about this session. So thank you, Liz Free. And we've decided to call it, going with we've got 10% braver, but we've got 15% poorer. Liz, tell us why we are 15%
poorer. It's a bit sensitive. I'm a bit sensitive about this at the moment. So Vivian, you should stay here, Vivian. We need you.
Yeah, come on, Vivian.
I was going to run away.
Yeah, you must have run away.
Because also you've got that lovely one of our campaigns, which is reduce gender pay gap. So this is perfect.
Exactly. So, so I'm Liz Free. I'm the director and CEO at the International School Rheintal in Switzerland. So I'm in the bunker in my house at the moment, but outside a beautiful mountain. So I did put my sparkly top on because it's Saturday night here in
Beautiful.
Switzerland.
I meant to say, I love that.
It's all
sparkly
going
top.
on. We've got the cows and bells and everything. Anyway, so it all started about 2 weeks ago, and I went on a course. Now, some of you who know me will know that I founded the International Leadership Academy and have worked in professional learning and development as well as school leadership. And so I was really excited to spend 3 days on a head of school. It's a mandatory course that if you're an international baccalaureate school, there are certain workshops and trainings and things that you have to do as part of your status. So I moved to Switzerland just over a year ago and head up an amazing international school that is an IB school from age 3 to 18. So I thought, right, I'm going to do this. So I kind of commandeered my time. I had my 3 days, I had my coffee, I was all good to go, and it started. And great content. It was talking about, international mindedness, equity, diversity. That's what all about the IB is funded on. It's funded on the very fundamentals of world peace and the value of every individual. It's why I'm a CEO and director of this sort of international school. So I get to 11 o'clock on the first morning, and all of the references, every education reference, had been male and had been white and had been British or American. Now, those of you that know the International Baccalaureate know that it's an international global organisation and an accredited provider for examinations and curriculum. They are all around the world, in every continent. So this is a little bit peculiar. And not only that, we know, those of you that have obviously read, we've got a 10% break there, 78% of our global profession is female. So how odd is it that I would sit in such a course, online, yes, but only hear from white Anglo-American men? Now, I don't have a problem with Anglo-American men. I married one. I quite like him, but that's not the point. So I began to think, this is a bit weird. So I sat down, I was ranting away. I was ranting away on Twitter because I was getting kind of a little bit frustrated by it. And I thought, Liz, just let it go, it's going to come, it will come. Day 3. By day 3, not one reference from any education research that underpinned the leadership development for heads of school, which is a mandatory course for the International Baccalaureate, was one woman mentioned. Not only that, again, the only men that were mentioned were either British, 60% of them were British, 40% of them were American. So this made me a little bit cross. And then I started to dig, well, you put your time and energy into the things that you value. So if IB is fundamentally, if just in this little snippet there's inequity, does this run deeper? And so I started to do a bit of research, and I thought, well, like all good leadership, let's start at the top. So I went to the top and I looked at the board of IB. Now, I was really excited because there was about 37% representation of women. And then I thought, well, that's a bit weird. Why am I excited to have a minority seat at the table? With 30% women, 78% women in the profession. But anyway, at least we were at the table. I mean, that was good. But then I started to look at the representation. Again, anglicised, Anglo-American bias. There is a very small representation of people of colour and not one black woman on the board. And let's not forget where International Baccalaureate operates, all around the world, and no representation of black women. So that's just all got a bit weirder. And then I started to look at the research that they now have these leadership behaviours and capabilities. They produced a whole leadership document. I looked at all of their research, over 70% of it Anglo-American. If you throw in these couple of other westernized countries like Australia, New Zealand, Spain, over 95% of their references came from those countries. And again, predominantly men. Then I thought, well, let me find out more about institutional sexism. What's the definition for institutional sexism? And I got the Oxford. I used to work for Oxford University, so I'm very proud to have a little OUP plug here for the dictionary. And there it was. Definition very clear. And I actually wrote it down to say institutional sexism is where gender discrimination is reflected in the policies and practices of an organisation. And this is usually exemplified in the gender pay gap. So I was like, right, the gender pay gap. It's a long story, sorry, Jules. And so, so I then thought, well, I know IB's got an office in Cardiff because I'm Welsh and I know that. It's a Welsh thing. And therefore, and I know because Vivian told me, if there are over 250 people in an organisation, they've got to report their data. It's a requirement under UK law. So then I went to the website, the UK Gov website, to look at. Mysteriously, they weren't there. I thought there must be more than 250 people working in Cardiff. So I went to the Charities Commission website and I looked up their accounts. Guess what? 258 people work in Cardiff. So I then contacted IB and said, I mysteriously can't find your data. Am I looking in the wrong place? They then emailed me back and said, we will report it. The deadline, by the way, is the 5th of October this year. So now, today, they have appeared. They are actually, they're listed as a company or a charity in the UK. And of course, they have over 250 employees and they have now published their data. And guess what? Their female staff in Cardiff earn, in the pound, they earn 15 pence less than their male colleagues. If we look at the bonuses that are paid, they get 50 out of a pound. They get 49p where their male colleagues get £1. Now, I've got a bit of a problem. I'm actually quite a moderate person generally, but I am a little bit angry, which all of the women-led ladies know this because I've been ranting about it for days. Because I'm so disappointed that an organisation that I fundamentally believe in and have aligned my whole ideology around education is aligned with what IB say they are, but they're not what they say they are, and they need to do better. And they've got a duty of care as an organisation that has always led the way in international education, in thinking of what can global education do? How can we create global citizens for the future? And it was interesting in Jerry's session just now, when Jerry was saying, you know, Jerry didn't want any young person to not see people around them that are like them. And I thought that is exactly it. And we've got to do better. So I'm very cross. So yes, that's it.
Oh, thank you, Liz. Wow. Well, I'm almost speechless because there's so many things there that but what the impact you can make from this and Women Ed can make, I think, is one, isn't it? Because it has to be called out, doesn't it?
It does. And do you know what someone said to me? Someone said to me, oh, Liz,
don't cause any trouble.
What if we get into trouble? I was like, how am I going to get into trouble? What are they going to do? We pay IB tens of thousands of francs every year. I think they're okay. I think I'm okay. We're adults here.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there was a fear. There's a fear of these large organisations that somehow they're beyond this conversation. And they've got to have this conversation. How can they move on if they don't acknowledge themselves that actually they do have an issue?
Yeah.
So how do we disrupt it? How do we disrupt it then?
Well,
I think I've been a little bit disruptive already, Vivian.
I meant next stage disruption.
What's the next stage?
Next stage.
I think
I've got meetings in the diary. I've got meetings with IB. We're teaming up with some of the different other organisations, women and other organisations working in diversity and inclusion.
Ask them about their app. They must have an application form for people who want to work for them.
Yes.
Ask them if they've got current salary on it.
Yes.
Because that's one straightforward way.
Yes. And as you know, Vivian, we talked a lot about this in my school. I took that off as soon as I arrived here last year. It's the first thing that went.
Yeah.
But what else can we do? It's not just IB. I'm calling IB out quite significantly.
Yeah, absolutely. But
I actually went through other international organisations because now I'm on a proper rant. And I started looking at other ones. You know, we look at Cognita, you know, Dulwich College. It's not just one, it's many. And it's not about public shaming. No. It's about recognising that this is not okay in this day and age. And we do have a voice. We are leaders in our communities. And I think we've got a duty of care to call it out. And then not only call it out, but come up with a solution. Okay, these are the things you can do. Vivian, like you just said, take that box off previous salary, because we know on the incremental points when people move in their roles, that's when women over time lose out. So I think trying to be part of the conversation, and that's
And it reminds me of in the very early days of Women Ed, the gendered cheese tag would often tag, and I again, I will say it because I blogged on it, but Teach First were one of the first that I tagged because their leadership poster was 5 white males under 30. So it completely alienated nearly everybody else other than those people. And actually I did, on Twitter, there was a discussion, and the person that was in charge of Teach First at the time did respond and didn't see a problem with it. Exactly. And that really concerns me. But they have changed since. I've watched their stuff, and they are much more representative now. So, and I know Benny Cara was a Teach First, and she was disappointed at the poster. So I think that just raising it first and then accepting it and then trying to change is great, because good on Teach First for doing that. All male panels at festivals we would often tag with a gendered cheese. They've stopped. I haven't seen one of those for a long time in education. So I think we can have an impact by calling it out. But I hope the IB will be like Teach First and accept the criticism and ask what we can do better, rather than get very defensive about it.
Yes, and to be fair, in my communication with them so far, and I'm in communication with multiple departments now, they've all responded. They've all responded quickly. They clearly know that this is an issue, particularly for the type of organisation that they are. If you go to their mission and vision, this is really important for them. And we're held to account on these standards as schools. When we're inspected, we have to prove that we're equitable, that we're internationally minded, that we're global citizens. And so I think they are definitely open, but I think sometimes in huge organizations, it runs so deep that it has to come, like all things, from the top.
I think that's a really good point, because I shared with all of you the other day that we've had a big win in terms of removing the current salary from the DFE's teacher vacancy application, and 80% of schools use their application form. And once I raised it, their immediate response was, "Oh, we shouldn't have that." And
it just hadn't been thought about in that way.
They haven't, and so they've removed it. So big up to the DFE. Sometimes it happens.
But thank goodness they're publishing, the UK government are publishing the data. In Europe, I mean, Switzerland's not in Europe, by the way, just, Switzerland always likes to be a bit different. But in the rest of Europe, there's no requirement yet to publish the data. And we need to encourage that. I think the UK does really well in raising awareness and also explaining what the data means.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Sorry, I've just been, Caroline has emailed us her slides, so I'm hoping I will be able to share the slides for Caroline as well. So sorry to interrupt. Can you see them? That's great. So I'm just going to, and they can go through. So Caroline, if you're watching, you can, we've got a few more minutes and then they will introduce you and I will do your slides for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, all right. But Liz, thank you for that. I think it was a really, it was a great moment. I hope Ruth is okay, and we love Ruth, and she's been here a long time, but I'm sure she'd be very proud to know that her session had been replaced with such a powerful
rant.
Rant.
Again, the powerful rant fits perfectly with daring to be different, not sitting and being silent, but saying, we can help you change this.
Yes. Yeah, and we are solution focused, aren't we?
We are. Once the rant has calmed down.
Lovely.
Thanks, Liz.
Great.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Carry on listening from the sidelines.
So, hello, Caroline.
Hello.
Hopefully, hello. You can put your camera on, and we should be able to see you then. And I'll do your slides. We're going to have to. I shall be your. You can be Professor Whitty, and you can say next slide, please, and I shall do those for you.
I was waiting for that.
But I'll switch my camera off. But I am here.
Cool. Thank you. Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Caroline Verdant. I'm a teacher, high-level teacher assistant at a Catholic primary school, where I do a lot of great work with the children. And today I'm going to be speaking about being a Black woman in society and setting boundaries within the work that I do, and also within being a woman of color. I've had many boundaries that I've had to overcome throughout my life, not realizing that maybe through ignorance or just through how I was brought up, that I didn't have to overcome boundaries, that I could just go through life and get what I wanted relatively easily. So you could say there was some ignorance there. Could you go on to the next slide, please? Lovely, thank you. So here I am. This is me at the age of 3. What is my place in society? Well, it's just to play with toys. I was the firstborn child, and my mum used me as a living dress-up doll, as you could see. I had no idea of what would be ahead of me with regards to my color. I was footloose and fancy-free and innocent, as all children should be at that age, and to hold on to some of that innocence as they get older. So if you look at it, Black women are often overlooked in people's conversations about racism, sexism, even though they face a unique combination of both. There have been times when I have said that I have a target on my back. I feel that way sometimes, and it is because of those two things. 1, I'm a woman. 2, I'm a Black woman, and I've come across times where you could say that I forget that I'm a Black woman at times, because I just want to go through life and enjoy things as I should as a woman. I was brought up by a woman who you will see later on, who came from the Windrush generation. It was a very hard upbringing because of my color. However, this was not explained to me as a child growing up. It was never said that you have to work harder than your white counterparts in order to get to where you need to go. No one ever really explained that. And even to that day, I don't understand why that still fits in with my place in society and the place in society for all women of color. It doesn't fit well with me, because I see it as a everyday challenge now, especially as I've got older and working in the education system, where I've had to fight racism and still again not realize that I was not taken for what I could deliver, but more so because my color got in the way of the work that I wanted to do. I often feel that if people were to listen to Black women more, and we're out there, that they would hear where we're coming from, why we feel the way we do, why we want to do more and give more back to society. We're all raising children, and those children need to see that we don't need to deal with these situations that have been put there in front of us unnecessarily. I try to raise my girls to believe that they can do whatever they want to do, regardless of the color of their skin. And I am fortunate to have 3 girls who are out there doing what they need to do and to be accepted, to have that acceptance. Acceptance is key to how we live. You want to be accepted. You don't necessarily want to be tolerated, which is how I feel we have been over the years, over the decades, centuries even, tolerated. It's not a tolerance we want, it's an acceptance that we want, something where we feel that we belong. And that is the main thing, belonging. And we do belong. Everyone belongs. And I just feel that there are times when we are looked over, we're not listened to, we're not felt, our passions aren't heard, our passions aren't felt for whatever reasons. Yeah, we should be out there shouting from the rooftops. We are here. This is what we want to do. Take us seriously. We've got so much to offer. And it's not just the color. Women generally have so much to offer. And it's a shame that the color barrier still stops us to this day to get what we truly need to get in order to live the lives that we want to live. Could we go on to the next slide, please? Okay, lovely. positive Black female role models. Now, in school, you'll say to children, oh, so who's your role model? And they will come out with some of the strangest things. Let's think of one. They will come out with things like Cardi B, when really and truly in a primary school, they shouldn't be listening to Cardi B. And Rihanna's not such a bad one because she's a fiercely independent woman and has done great things for her community. But for me, as a child growing up, my role model firstly was my mum. And as I said before, she was part of the Windrush generation and came over here when, at a time where Black people were not accepted, or you could say at a time where no one really knew much about Black people. So she came over here from Barbados. My parents are both from Barbados, and had to face the most awful racism. We've heard stories at home, and the other person in the picture is my sister. We've heard stories where that tag of when they were looking for housing in London, no Blacks, no Irish, no dogs. And I mean, that has rung in my ears for years, and I know that people have heard that saying, but to know that my parents were faced with that when they came into this country was a bit like, and it was constantly told to us when we were growing up. And my mum worked ridiculously long hours and had such a strong work ethic. And it's something that I carry with me also, because I love to work. I enjoy the work that I do in school. I enjoy the work that I do outside of school. And she has been a constant inspiration for me because she never gave up. She never gave up on anything. She's worked hard. She's been in this country for 60 years. And I think she's built a life for my sister and I as we were growing up, of one that they didn't want us to experience growing up. And in a sense, I've still had to experience some of what my mum experienced, but not to such a degree of in-your-face racism. It's always really very subtle. Never had to deal with the in-your-face racism. My sister now is my younger sister, and she is still a role model to me because she too has the same work ethic as my mother. She works hard. We all work hard, but we find the times that when we're working hard that we don't necessarily go out there for appreciation. We want to be accepted, as I said before. To be appreciated means that, yes, you're doing a great job. My sister's had to go through very many obstacles in finding work, and due to the fact that she had a degree, that actually opened doors for her. But there have been times when, a prime example, as you can see there in that photograph, both my sister and I had, well, you can see I'm bald now. We both had locks at that time. And I remember my sister, when she was younger, going for a job in Harrods with her locks. And they made it quite clear to her that she could not work in Harrods with her locks. Now, I say locks because everyone says dreadlocks. And we know the connotation that comes with the word dread is to fear. And I think that has been instilled in minds of many people. You call them dreadlocks, so you're going to dread us, you're going to dread what we bring. But she was innocent, straight out of university, eager to work. And because of her appearance, not only was she Black, she had what were called dreadlocks. And she wasn't given a job. She was actually told that she could not work in Harrods with that type of hairstyle. Now, that is in-your-face racism. I never experienced that, but I do know that when I began my journey with regards to my locks, everything changed, because prior to that, I used to have hair extensions and weaves, and everyone would say, oh, Caroline, you look great, you look lovely, blah, blah, blah. When I started that journey to grow my locks, no one said anything to me. No one said a word. They didn't say, oh, that's different. You could see the dread in their faces, to be quite honest, as my hair began to grow. And this was in a school education environment, because I've been teaching for over 15 years now. And nothing was ever said about my hair. And I was enjoying my journey with my hair. And it dawned on me then that, I don't think very many people like this. So at the bottom, you've got and me. And I like to see myself as a positive role model because of the many things I've gone through. In the school that I'm currently in now, I have become a leader through the fact that the SLT team in our school are phenomenal. I was at St. Anthony's now 10 years, and I had asked to be a high-level teacher assistant for at least 3 of those years and was refused constantly. Didn't know why. One reason was they said there wasn't enough money in the budget for me to do this course. Then a year or so later, a colleague of mine, who I would have to say, yes, a white lady, then became a high-level teacher assistant who did not want to become a high-level teacher assistant. And that then dawned on me and said, okay, all right, there's something not right here. I've been asking for 3 years. You've never asked. They've put you on the course. You don't want to do it. And she was doing the job that I really wanted to do. I wanted to be able to teach in a classroom, be with the children. It took for my current head, who started 6 years ago, and she started in the February. She's Black. So I thought to myself, okay, fine. We're going to do the whole working together. We're both Black. Hopefully she will see in me what I wanted her to see, that I work hard. I'm committed to my role as a teacher assistant, which is what I was at the time. So she started in the February, and I remember knocking on her door the very first day she started, and I said to her, I really want to be a high-level teacher assistant. That was in the February. By the October, I was qualified. I was qualified to do the job that I had passionately wanted to do. And that was because I saw a door open for me. I saw someone else that looked like me in my environment. And it was like, it just made sense for me to ask. And I truly believe that if I hadn't have asked, or if she hadn't have come into the school, I don't think I'd still be in education now, because I'd been turned off to the fact that I wasn't looked at as valued in the role that I was doing. And I knew I was doing a good job. And it's not about boasting. I genuinely knew I was doing a good job. I loved the job I was doing. And to feel as though I couldn't go any further in education was a bit like, okay, Caroline, what are you going to do? What would you do? And my head teacher, Mrs. Moore, came around at the exact right time. She came when I needed to have that bit more in my life as a Black woman. Otherwise, what else was I going to do? And I do know that when she did her handover, and I don't know why they do this, but she did actually tell me this, that the previous head had seen me as a bit of a troublemaker. But we're going to go on to that, and I'll explain to you why. If you could go on to the next slide, please. There we go. Stereotypes. Black women expressing themselves. Now, this is the point that I'm speaking about. When given the handover, when I became a high-level teacher assistant, the head previously had called me out to the new head as a troublemaker. So their definition of a troublemaker, and I know exactly what it was I was doing at the time, was I was very opinionated. I spoke out. Wherever I saw wrong, I called it out constantly. And that's just the type of person I am. But because of the stereotypes that Black women have, if you become angry or opinionated, you're then seen as being aggressive. I wasn't aggressive. I just called out wrong. When I saw it, I called it out. And people saw that as me being a troublemaker. And I'm really not. Anyone who knows, I am not a troublemaker. That's just not me. I just don't like mistreatment or injustices. I really do stand for justice. That's what I'm all about. It's not about being a troublemaker. I'm who I am. And if I see wrong, I'm going to tell you, well, I really don't think that's right. Maybe we should do this. And I was never listened to, which is the thing that I'm saying. I wasn't listened to. And I feel in society, Black women aren't listened to because we're seen to be aggressive when we speak out or when we say something that's that someone else doesn't like, or something that seems to be insensitive. But no, it's a human, regardless of color, saying what they feel, and we should be allowed to express ourselves and say what we feel regardless of who we are. And then understanding the treatment of Black women, it's hard. It's hard to go through a life where your color's seen first. And yes, it is unfortunate, but yeah, when you see me, you see, I mean, some people will see my blonde hair. I mean, okay, a Black woman with blonde hair is a bit of an anomaly, but more of us are doing it now. And I just feel that in striving for betterment as a Black woman, I still got these obstacles to overcome. And I'm fortunate to be here today amongst the women ed community who are just amazing, and to share this and to be listened to. Like, I'm speaking and I'm being listened to, and as it said on my first slide, 10% braver every day. If you had asked me however many years ago if I'd be sat here talking to a group of women about what it's like to be Black in society, I would have told you, go away. Caroline's not doing that. No, that's just ridiculous. Why am I going to speak about being Black? I'm Black and that's the end of it. There's nothing much I can do about that. So I know there's someone listening to that, and I'm going to shout them out. Becky, thank you, because I became 10% braver after seeing you last year. And yes, the key often starts with listening to Black women about their concerns and what their needs are, and then delivering accordingly. So how do we do that? How do we deliver accordingly? How do we get others to listen to our journey, to understand that we've not done anything wrong? Plain and simple, we haven't done anything wrong. We are here. We want to be here. We're here. We're just here. Why must I struggle? Why do I need to struggle? Why can't I just do what I want to do, enjoy what I want to do without my color being looked at? It's taken me many years to get to this point where I'm comfortable in my skin, and my parents raised me to be comfortable in my skin. I was sent to a dancing school. I teach dance at St. Anthony's as well, but I was sent to a dancing school at the age of 8. Now, this was in 1978. So if you want to work out my age, you actually can. And it was a time where Black children didn't dance. Black people, they just didn't dance. There were, I'm trying to remember now. There were something like 6 children in this dancing school of near on 100. And my parents threw us into that for some strange reason, but I'm blessed that they did, because we were great at what we did. But you look at it and you think to yourself, well, there's no one else of our color. And I was taught by a white lady who was phenomenal. But we were put into an arena. I'm still not too sure why my parents did this, but we were put into an arena. We had a hobby, but then I faced racism at around the age of 10 and had my dad explain it to me. So I was in a dance competition, and all right, okay, cool. Your parents are going to be biased at the best of times anyway, but they were always the only Black parents in the audience up until the early 90s, say. But at that time, when I was 10, I had danced my socks off at a competition, and someone else had won. I hadn't, which is fine. But when my dad got me home with my silver medal, he was like, you do know you dance better than the girl that won. I'm like, well, I enjoyed dancing. I danced, I enjoyed it. And I got a medal. I got a silver medal. That didn't matter. I got a medal. But my dad said, you know, she only won because she was white. I'm like, what? At the age of 10, that made no sense to me. It made absolutely no sense to me. Why would someone win a medal because of their color? So if she's white and I'm Black, so why can't I win a medal because I'm Black? But as I got older and progressed into my dance career, yeah, I could see it. I could see people getting parts who could not dance as well as I could. And it was obvious to see. but still really very subtle, because no one actually came out and said anything. You just saw the results for yourself. But to deliver it accordingly is for everyone to just listen to one another, listen to how we want to be seen, how we should be seen. We should be seen as women. We're all women. The color barrier, even today, still really does get to me, because we're all passionate. We all want to go in the directions we need to go in without being stopped and checked for the color of our skin. Okay, next slide, please. All right, setting boundaries. I found this really hard, and how to set them. For me, it's a case of I've had to take care of my own well-being, and in doing that, I've had the support of my family, my girls, my husband, my parents, my extended family, like work colleagues that I've grown to love and see as part of family. Once I'm surrounded by that support network, my boundaries are they're set by the passion and purpose that I have in life, and that is to teach, that is to make change in the world. And I'm actually doing that. I'm able to do that now. The only one boundary that I have an issue with, which I'm seriously trying to work on, is saying no. I'm not very good at saying no. I will juggle everything to make sure everyone is fine, and sometimes forget about my own well-being. And I've taken a better hold of that through meditation and looking after myself health-wise. I dance at school. I teach dance at school, as I said, and I'm able to now look at life and say, okay, so this is what I want to do, and forget my color. I'm going to go for it. I'm not going to demean myself in any way. The boundaries that I set are like my time and my energy. What can I put into the things that I'm doing in my life, and how can I do that effectively and efficiently? And it's about valuing who I am, taking control of me, what I do and what I deliver, is so important. And I'll give you an example, a really quick example of value in today's society with regards to women of color. I'm sorry that I'm going to go on to this one, but R. Kelly is a prime example of what we have had to deal with as Black women. I don't think it would have taken this long, near on 30 years, for this man to be convicted had his victims been white. And I'm saying it. I really don't believe so. And we deserve better from society, a society that understands us and sees the contribution that we are willing to give to society. Had there been any value on those women, had they not been Black, I think his conviction would have happened a lot quicker. Also, tokenism. I don't want to be in a room where I'm put there because it will look good for a Black woman to be in that room or on that table. I want to be at that table because that's the table that I want to be at, not because someone feels that being Black means I need to be at that table just for face value. That's not, that really isn't what I'm about. And I've been in that place where I've been used for tokenism, and it's not a good place to be. And the future, if you could go on to the next slide, please. And I think this is my final one. Okay, so in this picture, you have me and my girls. So there is Yasmin, who is 24, graduated from university this year. Saffron, who is 16, she's now at Sixth Form College. And Amber, who is 10, and she's at St. Anthony's Catholic Primary School with me, where I teach. And for me, I have to be a positive role model to them. This is why I'm doing what I do, so that they can see that they can do whatever they want to do, regardless of their color. And yeah, they're my everything. They're my future leaders, and they will lead other leaders. Yeah, so thank you. That is me.
Oh wow, I was just I couldn't stop listening to you. Every time you said next slide please, I had to kind of come out of this meditative state because I was listening to it and I just forgot where I was. It was a fantastic and very uplifting talk, Carol, and lots of comments in the chat as well. Thank you, it's so inspiring. Thank you for an amazing talk. There were a few people outraged by the fact that you were labelled as a troublemaker, but I know you're not the only woman, particularly Black woman, that has been called that. So I'm glad you did get ahead, that gave you that chance.
Yes,
eventually.
so am I. Thank you.
Yeah,
I truly am blessed for that.
Yeah, fantastic. Liz asked what advice you would give to your younger self now.
What advice I'd give to my younger self? Oh,
That's a good question, isn't it, for all of us?
My younger self. Keep going. Never give up. Don't look at the color of your skin as a reason to stop you from doing what you need to do. As I said, my parents never explained why I had to work harder than anyone else. And it's something that has stayed with me, but not something that I've passed on to my own children. Because there's no way of explaining that. You just work hard generally. If you're a hard worker, that's what you're going to do, not because of the color of your skin. I sometimes think that the parents of that generation didn't explain things very well. I mean, I was brought up very well, but they really weren't very good at explaining things. And I've switched that. I hope I've switched that.
Great. I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure that. And I liked your analogy when you said about opening the, going once the door was open for you with your head, that you went straight in there. And I think we all need to do that. If a door opens, walk straight through.
And my husband says it about me all the time. When I see a green light, I'm gone.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. Oh, Caroline, thank you. Vivian, I know, has been trying to persuade you to come on and talk. So Vivian, I'll leave you to have the last comments before we go to our next speaker.
Oh, I think when you see the tweets, Caroline, you'll see all the comments that everybody would want to hear. It's been so lovely to meet you properly, and thank you very much indeed.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you.
Hope to meet you in the real next year. Fingers crossed.
I'd love to. Thank you.
Bye-bye. So, Vivian, we have, have you seen?
Yes.
Waiting in the Wings.
Yes.
Sandra Wees in the Wings. Do you want to turn your camera on? This is a session on being a department head. Oh, hi, hello. I didn't see it. Being a department head from underrepresented groups and a role model for students. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. How's everyone doing?
Great. It's going really well. I'm feeling very inspired. I'm loving this daring to be different section.
I know, definitely. It's been great listening to all the talks previously. So it's really, really good, really inspiring.
Great. Well, we'll let you introduce yourself. And are you happy to share a screen if you need to, or are you?
I can share a screen.
Let's see
if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll turn our cameras off and let you go.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for, firstly, Women Ed for giving me this opportunity to present, but also for everyone that's listening and is here to talk about diversity and Women Ed and being ready to disrupt, innovate, and change. I'm Tandy. So I'm a head of department. I'm a faculty lead now out of school in Banstead in Surrey. And I haven't always been a faculty lead. So I'll talk briefly about how I got into middle leadership. I'm really passionate about representation in middle leadership, but also representation across the board and diversity across the board. And the other thing that I'm really passionate about is teachers and educators acting as role models for students. So I'll share some stories, I'll share some things that I've learned, things that people could think about if they're thinking about middle leadership, but also things to be wary of and actually understanding as ethnic minorities, what really your influence is and how powerful your story is to those students that are looking up to you as a role model. So to start off, I trained in 2013. I started during my training year, I was lucky. I trained in Exeter. I'm Zambian by birth, and then we moved to Exeter. My mum was a nurse. My dad was a civil and mechanical engineer. But when we moved over here, my parents, I think like most immigrants, my parents didn't really get the jobs that they should have got based on their qualifications. And that's something that's really common with any sort of immigration, particularly from immigrants from Africa. So my dad worked for Stagecoach, even though he had an extensive career in engineering and run companies in Zambia. He worked for Stagecoach. My mum had 3 jobs. So as a student, I didn't really have that exposure to that most students in my school had. I went to school in a very tiny village in Crediton, and we were the only Black family there. So you can imagine what that felt like. So me and my 2 sisters were the only Black family there. However, we had quite passionate teachers, and our teachers were really great at incorporating us into the community. So we settled in fairly quickly, and students really bought into the idea of having a new family from Africa in the community. There was 8 houses in the village that I lived in. So you can imagine how small that was. My physics teacher at the time, he's also on Twitter, Mr. Baker, was really, really great at introducing me to STEM, and he identified that I really loved sciences. So he kind of gave me the inspiration to become a head of STEM once I trained. I was very lucky. I trained at exactly the school that I went to as well. So my teachers were my mentors, and I absolutely loved it, and I was very familiar. And I think had I gone to a school that I wasn't familiar with, I don't think I would have become a teacher. When I graduated, I did a degree in medical microbiology. I phoned my teacher up and I said, I don't know what to do. I don't know if I want to go into research. And my biology teacher said, you would be a great biology teacher, so I think you should train. And he was actually a SCIT trainee. So I graduated, and as soon as I got my my certificate, I was on a plane from Aberdeen back to Exeter to then start my SCIT training the next day. So I didn't do the partying that came with it, which is a shame. I missed that. So then I became a head of STEM fairly early on. So in my NQT year at the school I worked in Teddington, they didn't really have STEM, and I had decided I was going to be a STEM teacher. So I became a head of STEM. I started the first ever STEM club. It got so big, 250 students. The parents really bought into it. But it was during that I realized that me being a Black woman was really preventing me from progressing in education. So even though I was given the title of head of STEM, I was never paid for it. It was never recognized as a role, despite the influence that it was having. So I then thought, well, I need to look for something else. And then a lot of people were like, well, if you went through the main educational route, becoming a head of subject, you are more likely to get a TLR. So that's what I did, became head of biology, even though I can teach all 3 sciences up to A level. And then I moved to schools, and I was in charge of primary liaisons, so all our 8 catchment schools. And again, that was really difficult for me because when you went into schools, they weren't expecting a Black person to turn up. And some of the comments that I used to get, I'll share them on the next slide. It was just quite shocking. So it's quite a transition for me. But I think one of the things was I always had my teacher to contact if I was struggling. And I think it's important to have that person, and it's important to be that person for someone. So they always sort of gave me the encouragement to keep going. And some of my teacher friends that I met in all the schools I've worked at have really kept me going. And I think they've helped me sort of get to my potential. I'm not yet there yet, I don't think, but they've helped me strive for excellence, really. So then I moved to Brighton, became a co-head of department, whatever that meant, where there was no head of department. And so I felt like I wasn't trusted to be head of department yet, despite me having a good record of raising standards. So I was made as a co-head of department with another lady. And then thankfully, someone on Twitter really saw me at a STEM competition and really wanted me to lead science at their school. So Gemma Singleton on Twitter was the amazing person that really identified that I had potential. And so I went to work at my current school. I started as a raising standards lead. That lasted 3 months. I was then made subject leader. That lasted 3 months. And then I was made faculty lead for science, which I've been doing for 2 years now. So I am absolutely grateful to the school that I'm at now, because I feel like I'm doing something that it really taps into what my strengths are, and something that really recognizes the skills that I personally have, or the willingness that I have to develop more skills in leadership. And that's because we've got a really diverse department, but also a really diverse staffing at my current school. And I think if all schools could really think about diversity in their employability, that would be really, really good. And I think it would encourage more Black graduates to go into teaching as well, because you have to see the person in the role that you want to be, really, for you to be inspired by that. It's very rare that you get inspired by someone that doesn't relate to you. And I think that's important for us to know as Black leaders, but also as women. So key things is I wanted to sort of think about what I have learned from being a head of department. And I think one of the most important things is I moved to schools hoping for someone to identify what I was good at. But I think on reflection, do your research before you move schools. Make sure the school that you're at is the right fit for you. I remember in my training year when I started looking for jobs, the reason I'm in Banstead and I'm in the London area as such was because when I started looking for jobs in Devon, I went to a job interview and I had a great day, a great lesson. And when it got to the interview session, the first words the head teacher of that school said to me was he didn't think I had the face for his school. And he was like, I'm pleasantly surprised by the feedback I've got. Apparently you're a great teacher, because when you walked in, I didn't think you had the right face. And so that really knocked my confidence. And I just couldn't apply for any jobs in Devon. And I thought, where would I find other Black people? Where would I find other women like me that are really passionate about their subject, really willing to be great teachers and develop their craft? And that's why I moved into the London area. So I think being aware of what biases exist against you as a woman and as an ethnic minority person, or a person from the BAME community, is really, really important, and knowing what you can do about it, but also knowing where you can go. So for instance, I'm a member of BAME Ed, and I look at their website and I read all their articles. Women Ed is really good for all the things that it's trying to do and all the campaigns that are coming up. The other thing is, the next thing I want to talk about is being able to speak up. So until I was 18, just due to the immigration and all that, I didn't really say much. So I was selectively mute. And when I tell my students that I was selectively mute, they get really shocked, because I speak for England now. So they get really shocked. And part of the reason I wasn't speaking was I didn't have that confidence. I didn't think I was good at science. I didn't think I was good at STEM subjects. And it was only after my teachers really identified that I was good at it, and they really encouraged me to do debate and really encouraged me to speak up. That's the only time I started then coming out of my shell. When I was in Zambia, I was fine. I spoke, I debated, I was on television for quiz shows for STEM. I was really flying. But when we moved over, it was such a tough transition. So I think my advice is be ready to speak up and know what you can speak up about. It's better to say something than to say nothing. And also have high expectations of yourself. Don't ever put yourself in a box and think, I can't do this. Try it. If it doesn't work, then think about why it didn't work. Look for advice, ask people. I ask a lot of questions. If you look at my Twitter account, I ask a lot of questions. I don't want to just ask just the people I work with. I want to get opinions from a broad spectrum of people, because then I can make a balanced decision about what I want to do and any decisions that I need to make, instead of it being just a very small collective group of people. The other thing I wanted to talk about is representation. So some of the things, when I worked at a school in Richmond on my first day there, at the end of the day, I was walking out of the school and another teacher asked me, they walked past me and they were like, oh, I just wanted to tell you that my bin is everything in my bin needs to be binned, put in recycling. So they thought I was a cleaner. They didn't think I was a teacher. I have people in the department that are really quiet, and I think it's be aware of what collectivist cultures are and what women come from, especially if they're coming from another country. Culturally, women are known to be quieter, so make sure you can identify those women in your department that have something to say and speak to them and encourage them to speak up. Identify what they're good at. Make sure they present something at department meeting that you've seen them do really, really well. But also for your students, if you empower your teachers as a head of department to speak up, they will then talk about their subject and they will become more passionate when they're teaching those students. And I've had, most schools that I've worked in have got a very low ethnic minority population. So those few ethnic minorities that are in your school need someone that they can go to. They need someone that looks like them to go to, because they find it really, really difficult if they are not represented. So it's important that we are role models, but as heads of department, it's important that you identify who in your department needs a voice and that everyone needs a voice. Then I think for me, my progression in my career as a middle leader, the one thing I've actually realized is how powerful my voice is for everyone, and for everyone in my department, for all my students. So for instance, we have just started in the last year a diversity and inclusion department. And I'm lucky enough to have an SLT that's willing to talk about diversity and inclusion, and they've opened it up and anyone can join. Encourage some of the quieter teachers to join that, even if they're just going to hear the views, and then they can come and feedback. Make sure students know your experiences. So I tell my students my experiences as an ethnic minority, because I don't want them to put another student in that position. And and one thing you need to know about young people is that young people have such a powerful influence on the world. They are the future, so they need to make informed decisions. So make sure that your story is told to your students as well. The other thing that I identified, as a head of department, you're required to do a lot of academic evenings. So whenever there's an academic evening, every head of department basically talks about their subjects, revision, all that sort of thing. And I've noticed that at the end of every academic evening, all the Black parents come and speak to me and they say, thank you so much for being a head of department as a Black woman. And that's really powerful. I didn't think of it as a big deal when I became a head of department, but some parents of ethnic minority students will relate to you as a middle leader. And even if you're not a Black person, I think being aware that parents of ethnic minority students may feel uncomfortable talking to certain members of staff, and making sure you check their home situation. I think collectivist cultures are very common in ethnic minority groups. So students that are not doing homework, you might want to check, do they have to look after their siblings? Do their parents have 3 or 4 jobs? Because ethnic minority people in this country particularly are more likely to not be in the top jobs. I mean, the landscape is slowly changing, but we're not there yet. So therefore, they're more likely to have 2 or 3 jobs. So your ethnic minority students are going through a lot, and knowing that will really support them as well. The picture that you see on the screen, this was a group of students from Sutton, and we did a project. And because of a story I told, these students wanted to do something about malaria. And I talked about, when I teach malaria, I talked about having malaria as a child and what that felt like. And so these 3 students came to me and they said, we want to do a project on malaria. And what they came up with was, what if there was a body butter that people in malaria zones could actually make themselves at home that had mosquito repellent properties? Because the problem with mosquito repellents, they're sold in boots, they are so expensive. But what about the people living in malaria zones? They don't have the money to buy an extra thing. But what they can do is they buy body butter, because, for instance, Black people's skin is more likely to be dehydrated. So body butter is a part of our culture. Shea butter is a part of our culture. So if we could incorporate the repellent properties into that, the students thought this would make a difference. And so they won the top prize of the Big Bang Fair, and their project is now in prototype stage. It would take 10 years for it to be approved. But had I not told my story to those students, they would have never thought about this. They didn't know what malaria was. They didn't know 6 million children a year suffer from malaria, and that it's such a fatal disease to children under 6 months. So for me, it's knowing your influence. As a middle leader, make sure you can incorporate diversity into your curriculum and incorporate that inspiration into the curriculum, because you have that power to really influence the development of your curriculum, especially now when curriculums are the hot topic as well. So just some of the things that I've talked about already. So if you're offering clubs, again, be aware of those students that can't do after school. So maybe think about lunchtime clubs. Recognize the students that are really passionate and get them to lead, because they will inspire more students. Make sure your teachers in your department, and you as a teacher, do you know what unconscious biases exist? Do all your PowerPoints just have white people? Do they just have men? Do they show a diverse range of careers? And in your schools, do we put our EAL students in lower sets because they have a language barrier? Most EAL students coming from other countries are put in lower sets. And why is that? So for instance, at the moment, as a head of department, that's one of the things that I identified, and making sure you give EAL students that opportunity to excel, and not just thinking they can only do foundation just because of a language barrier. I had a girl from Greece a few years ago. She came in year 11, and like November time, straight into year 11, didn't speak a word of English. And it was just putting in that extra intervention for her for science. Other departments refused to put her into a higher tier, but she was so passionate. She wanted to be a scientist. So I took the risk. And she walked away with grade 8s in science. And it's understanding that you need to identify what those students are good at and not just put them in a box as well. You can easily do. I think the thing that lockdown has really taught us is that the power of the internet and the power of IT. So Google Forms can do a lot. If you're a head of department listening, have you thought about sending a Google form to your students so they can tell you what their aspirations are? Because if you know their aspirations, you can ensure your curriculum showcases those aspirations and more. So for instance, in a STEM aspect, 16% of all your students strive to do a STEM career. What percentage would strive to do MFL careers? What percentage would strive to be linguists? Do you know what that percentage is? You can do this as a teacher. You don't have to be a head of department. You don't have to wait until your careers advisor does it. If some schools may not have the opportunity to have a careers advisor, so then it's up to us as teachers to really lead that, and up to us as women to really advocate for diversity in those careers and that showcasing of every single opportunity that students have. Do you know what organizations offer what? Do you know about NAFIL placements? Do you know about experience in schools? So most of the things that I'm moving towards are about empowering students. So I speak for physics maths tutor who are listening at the moment. Hello. And I speak at the Girls into STEM events, but you could speak at any organization and young people will listen. They really are willing to do so many things. So the students that you see, these are girls that have worked with me all through sixth form, and they now come back to their university and they come back to my current school, even though it's not the school they went to, and they help me run STEM. So I've got another student that emailed me yesterday wanting to help with STEM. And that's because I went out of my way, and we as a department went out of our way to make sure we were passionate about our subjects and we really showcased diversity as well. And this will appeal to all students. Yes, you will target those ethnic minority students, but you will appeal to all students. And that's what diversity is. It's about inclusivity and including absolutely everyone as well. The last thing I wanted to share with you is this was probably the one card that made me really, really realize what I was doing as a Black teacher. So this is a girl that I taught 3 years ago. She's now going to Cambridge to do anthropology, and this was her leaving card. And it was just one of the saddest cards I've ever got. But also it made me more, it inspired me to do more, and I will always strive to advocate for diversity, and I always strive to talk about diversity, and I will always speak up. And this girl really made me raise my volition to really talk about diversity and women and Black women and ethnic minorities and BAME more, and just be that person for that student and for that teacher that may not necessarily have anyone to look up to. So this is me. Hopefully that was okay.
Oh, that's more than okay. Well, more than okay. That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Thandi.
Thank you so much for having me. If there's any questions, please just ask. I'm willing to answer. I think I've got some time left. So if there's any questions, please just ask. I will do this and I can see the questions as well.
That would be super. If you could answer the questions in the chat, that would be brilliant, because I think we're running out of time.
Okay, perfect.
Is that all right? That's fantastic.
That's absolutely fine. Yeah,
we were running over a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I love that card. It just shows how powerful one teacher, one student, that power of that, isn't it? I'm sure you've influenced many, but it's amazing to see that card. Yeah.
And I think it's just doing it. Even if you're doing it for one student, you may reach more than one student.
Absolutely.
And and I think it's the landscape is changing. I think we need to recognize that the landscape is changing. Events like this wouldn't happen if the landscape wasn't changing.
But we need to keep pushing. We need to keep pushing it.
And we need to, we need to not lose our volition. And I think it's not letting things shut you down. I think I would have got to the point that I'm at much quicker. Because I'm really ambitious and I'm really driven, but at least I'm there and I'm getting there, and I will do more.
Keep being ambitious. And thank you so much.
Is that okay?
Yes, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Thandi. Good to see you.
Thank you.
And we have Yasmin waiting in the wings. Hello, Yasmin.
Hi, good evening, or evening here.
Hello. Hello. It's evening here as well.
Okay. Time zones are all mixed up. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Yasmin. I'm currently in the UAE. So shall I begin? I know the time is.
Yeah, we'll turn our cameras off, but we're here if you need anything.
Cool. Hopefully I should be able to share as well.
Thank you.
Okay, let me see if I can share that. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes, we
Yes.
can. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, so just, I know we're quite wary of time, so if I just introduce myself and then sort of my sort of topic, my ideas today. So my name,
Yasmin, can you show us it in presentation mode? Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, so firstly, thank you so much. It's been so inspiring sort of listening to so many stories, and quite mesmerizing actually at points. Really, really excited to be here, and thank you all for giving me the opportunity to. So my name is Yasmin. So a bit about me. I trained in London, in London school, through the Schools Direct route. So I did the SKIP training program. I carried on at the same school, did my NQT year. I then went straight into middle leadership at my school. So it was a fantastic school. I stayed sort of there from my training year, moved into middle leadership. And this year, so August 2021, I moved to the UAE. So I'm currently in Dubai at the moment, carrying on my teaching career. So an exciting new venture with sort of many challenges, I'm sure, and that's sort of due to continue. So today, I just wanted to sort of present my ideas for my dissertation research. So I'm actually currently in the midst of finishing my thesis, my research for my Masters in Education, Power and Social Change. So I wanted to look at this idea of social justice in secondary education. I think it's a very apt topic at the moment. I think it's quite a big buzzword in education. But the sort of perspective I took was, I think, quite different. So the question I was sort of asking was, what can the activism of Black female teachers tell us about social justice within secondary education? So it's really about challenging sort of invisibility of voices within the academy, so not just within secondary education, but thinking about university as well and research. How are Black women researched and who researches them? Where are the voices located within the education research field? So a bit about my context on my why and my rationale as to why I came up with this topic or decided to explore it further is as a Black woman working in a secondary school, which had quite a high percentage of BAME students. So it was a boys' school. Most of the students were from, a BAME background. And so many of the staff as well, I was fortunate to work with a very, very diverse team at the time. And particularly with the women, we'd frequently have conversations which form this almost sisterhood, where we talk about the journeys, the problems that we face, or how we sort of figure and sort of navigate our ways within secondary school as teachers and different levels. And so there was this almost, you could say, this familiarity, this kind of journey that we went on that was quite different perhaps to other teachers, so that we'd navigate certain situations, certain conversations with students, as well as with other team members. And so that the research almost took like a bit of a natural journey from there. Another sort of reason why I decided to look at the topic is given the urgency of social justice work within education, particularly in secondary schools now. Of course, the tragedies of last summer, given the sort of tragic death of George Floyd, race, issues of racism have become, there's a sense of urgency around race and issues of racism. And so I think it was very apt that, my research should take place at this particular point. Another reason is that I feel that teachers should be seen as valuable in the education research field. And so oftentimes what you find is education is researched, or teachers are researched by non-teachers. And I really wanted to sort of give opportunities for teachers to really bring their experiences of being in the field, if you like, of education in this current day and age, and sort of have their voices opened up. Moving on then, so my research really sort of centres Black female voices. So I use a Black womanist lens to explore the lived realities and sort of experiences of Black women. And so this idea of, the activism that now occurs when it comes to sort of Black Lives Matter, you've got so many organisations which are coming up, which is fantastic. And, a lot of work is going on. But my premise lies in the fact that actually a lot of this work was already happening. It already existed before a lot of these organisations came about. And so my research aimed to create a sense of urgency and bring together a necessary focus on Black female teachers as valuable in offering insights into the education system. And so my work is really heavily inspired by the works of Bell Hooks, looking at this idea for transformative education, looking at the daily routines, the daily activities of Black women, and how they navigate themselves and what they can tell us explicitly about education and the ways in which we can improve and navigate the sort of conversations around race and racism. So just move on to here. So it was about creating a safe space. So when we look at research as well, particularly in education, you have a lot of these sort of research dynamic. And so I wanted to move away from this particular dynamic where I was acting as the interviewer and, I was sort of looking into the lives, almost invading the lives of Black women. And so my research sort of took a slightly more organic approach, tried to move away from this power dynamic. And so what I had was I carried out what I called conversations. So I didn't use the language of interviews. I sort of had conversations with Black women, some that I knew, some that I didn't, from various walks of life, from various age groups. And what we did is we just spoke. And so I used semi-structured interviews where we spoke about their daily routines, we spoke about what's important to them, we spoke about we spoke about many things. And so what I am currently in the middle of doing is sort of coding those kind of transcripts and bringing together real sort of raw discussions about real issues that we currently face in education and what the women who are, if you like, on the ground have to say about it. Yes, so that is what's happened so far. So I've managed to speak with many women and it's been so insightful. And I'm really excited to sort of finish up this research and, maybe sort of disseminate the knowledge in a way that, again, is not going to be creating any kind of power dynamic. It's going to be a piece of work which hopefully people can engage with. I'm very cautious of the language that I'm using and sort of creating, a real representation and allowing these voices to exist in a safe space, which is very important. So some of the things that I'm interested in moving forward is looking at how we facilitate safe spaces for Black women in education. I think it's very apt that I'm sort of asking these questions given the previous sessions we've just had about creating safe spaces for Black women. And this is more so particularly in the research field and how they can contribute to it. Secondly, how can we promote social justice that goes beyond performativity and representation in secondary schools and perhaps beyond? Looking at the entire sort of education sector, how do we actually centre social justice that is rooted in sort of looking at community activism, grassroots, looking at, a kindness? Okay, how can we promote this kind of social justice that is not just about placing sort of, people in specific places, but really sort of working towards a real curriculum and a real education structure that promotes social justice? So these are sort of the next questions that I'm hoping to ask and maybe research a bit further. But for the time being, that's sort of where my research lies. And I think that, when we talk about issues of race and racism, it's not, sort of limited to that. It's about, as Bell Hooks says sort of here, it's about ending domination in all its forms to work for justice. And so when we look at our curriculum, when we look at our schools, the structures, etc., it's very important to always remember that these conversations pre-existed the sort of the Black Lives Movement. Black women have been having these conversations. They have been carrying out activism in their daily routines, which perhaps are different to traditional forms of activism, things that are not so obvious and not so outspoken. And I'm really excited to hopefully bring these voices to the forefront and everyone can sort of hear and sort of see what's going on from my side. So that was it from me, really. It was just a chance to sort of share my ideas and perhaps get some feedback. If anybody's actually interested in participating at any point or has any questions or ideas, I do have my details down here. So please feel free to get into contact. But that's all from me.
Thank you, Yasmin. That was really interesting. Bell Hooks was one of the first people that somebody recommended to me when we were looking at this. But that's really interesting research. Have you got quite a few people as part of that? I mean, that's something we can maybe publicise for you if you need more people.
So I've actually sort of finished with the conversations at the time being. My deadline's very quickly approaching, but hopefully once it's published, I'll be able to reshare some ideas and perhaps pick up, any suggestions, any points, or any kind of extra work that hopefully it'll go big, it'll get bigger hopefully, and I'll keep you updated on that.
Well, definitely, yeah. We'll have to hear more next year. Or in Women Ed London or something. Yeah.
Absolutely, especially safe places to facilitate conversations for Black women teachers and leaders. That would be a fascinating thing to explore.
Yeah, definitely. I think the sort of one of the things I spoke about in my literature review was the fact that actually universities are able to have these conversations and sort of, have these kind of radical politics and discuss these kind of ideas, whereas the secondary school sector is a bit more closeted from these things, despite the fact that our, kids are exposed to these things. I remember after we came back from lockdown and we had posters going up saying Black Lives Matter, and we were told to rip them down. And so how can we sort of promote social justice in a way that fits into, our current model of education, the current politics, that goes beyond performativity? It's so important because it's almost like every school you go into, this is brewing. It's a topic that needs to be discussed. It's the sort of systemic change that needs to happen. And kids also need, students also need the safe space to be able to talk about these things. So it's a huge topic, but I think it will, we'll work towards getting somewhere with it.
Absolutely. And daring to be different again in a different way. Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yasmin. So our next session is with Lisa. So I'm wondering if Lisa's had a bit of any rest at all. I'm slightly worried you've had no sleep at all, Lisa, for about 4 days, but
no, I think I'm all right. I'm all
Good.
Right.
Okay. Well,
this is what you have to learn next year, not to volunteer for everything.
That is where I will learn that. Yeah.
No, we love having you though here.
Oh, absolutely. And before you start, Lisa.
Oh yes, I've got mine. I'll wear mine tomorrow. Mine's downstairs in my bedroom.
I wore it just for this session, Jules.
Oh, you're such a teacher's pet. I shall get mine tomorrow. Oh, well, we're looking forward to hearing your session in the Daring to be Different section. And I know you are a real advocate and champion of being who you are. So your journey to self-acceptance, I'm very much looking forward to hearing from you.
Yes, and it is a naked presentation. I don't have any slides at all. So
okay.
Just get to see me.
Okay, I thought you were just about to jump up with no clothes on, but
well, now
we've had that conversation before.
That was the
Did
same.
Lisa just say she's going naked?
I had that thought too.
That's woken us all up, hasn't it? We've had that conversation before. I believe tassels came into the conversation somewhere.
I don't have any tassels.
Okay, good. Right. Well, I'm going to turn my camera off now, and I'll see you on the other side.
All right. Hello, hello. I'm going to open my session the way that we would open a learning session here in Canada. I'm going to open it in a way I'm just learning, in an Indigenous way. If we were together, we would be in circle for this session. And I would have everyone in the circle talk about 4 great questions that we encourage all children to answer, but particularly Indigenous children. And so those questions: where do I come from? Where am I going? Why am I here? And who am I? So I'm Lisa Hanna. I'm an assistant principal at a fairly large high school in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, so right in the Rocky Mountains. I am 52 and I identify as a lesbian, as well as identify as a number of other things. My distant family is from Scotland, so hence my love for that fine country. I do believe, though my family were run out as criminals, There is a Hannah Castle in southern Scotland that I have yet to see, but would love to see at some point. I grew up in Manitoba mostly, and then moved to Alberta with my family when I was about 12 or 13. All of my extended family is in Manitoba. Where am I going? I always say a decade away from retiring, but I'm really loving where I am right now, and I'm loving my admin team. So I could be teaching for 12, 13, 14 more years. I'm in a really good spot, and I'm going to talk about that good spot that I'm in throughout this presentation. Why am I here? Very quickly, a few years ago, was at a Women Ed session. I am still one of those women that when there's tears, I roll my eyes. When women talk about their periods and menopause, I cringe a little, but I'm growing, I promise. And who am I? I am a fierce friend. I am a fierce auntie. I am passionate about empowering women. And I'm Lisa. I'm a lot of things, but right now at this moment, I am Lisa. Our elders here in Alberta or British Columbia or Saskatchewan or Ontario, wherever you are in Canada, an elder recommends that we honor and acknowledge the land. The land acknowledgement would change according to the treaty land that you happen to reside in. So I would like to acknowledge the traditional territories and oral practices of the Blackfoot Nations, which includes the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai. We also acknowledge the Tsuut'ina and Stoney Nakoda First Nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. Hi, hi. So here I am, last session on the Saturday. I've been up since 1. I've had a week of bad sleep. If I have to say, it's because my period was going to start okay. And I've heard so many things that could have been my story. And that is what I love about Women Ed. And that, I think, is what builds that collective synergy and power and propels us forward as a huge global network. My notes are here taped to my other screen, so I'm looking up and down. I would love to be at an unconference in person, but the irony is, COVID or not, it's unlikely that I would have been there this year. I travel very well, and I already have my money booked for a cruise in the summer. So to pay for a ticket and a hotel, I'm really hoping next year, when things are back to a typical way of living, that I'll be able to meet all of you in person. You really are my inspiration for being who I am. So I could be described as a woman of extremes, and I ride the rails between humility and grandiosity. So in my grandiosity part of my brain, I'm imagining giving you a TED Talk full of inspiration, maybe a few laughs. But if you're one of those data and science folks, bear with me. Maybe read Twitter for a little while, go to the bathroom. This might not resonate with you. This is Lisa and my journey from teacher in service, pre-service to now. There are going to be 3 parts to this session. Things I've written about in the past, weight and addiction, coming out, sexuality, and mental health. Part 1, part 2, part 3. Now, I thought I was being clever by not having slides or video. But I thought, you know, those kids on the Facebook, they have those cards and they tell us a story and they flip the cards. Well, I put all my quotes on cards, but guess what? It's backwards. Yikes. This is what happens when you turn 52, you young women that are listening. I want to read to you though, because it'll be backwards. See, it'll be backwards. My favorite quote that I heard in my early 20s, so 30 years ago. It's not backwards? Oh, bless your heart. Good teaching cannot be reduced to technique. Good teaching comes from the identity and integrity of the teacher. I was in teacher pre-service in the late 80s, early 90s, and a prof read from Parker J. Palmer's Courage of Stories. And it's a book I have referred to for 30 years in blogs, in chapters I've helped write with Women Ed. And it's just absolutely the core of my belief system. You can go to as many PD workshops, sessions, conferences, learn all of the strategies you could, but if your inner landscape as a teacher or a leader, feel free to substitute teacher for leader. I don't know how effective of a teacher or leader you would be. And this is why this means so much to me. If we don't know our identity, if we don't know who we are, and then why we are and why we do what we do, how can we lead a staff? How can we lead kids to be better citizens of today and tomorrow? So in a nutshell, this session is going to walk through those three parts. It's going to talk a little bit about some of the detours my life has taken. I do have a WordPress blog site that I haven't blogged in quite some time, but I am on there, and lots of my blogs might resonate with some of you. But recently on Facebook, I came across Sarah Milliken. Now, those of you in the UK ought to know who Sarah Milliken is. She's a stand-up comic and funny as heck. And she recently had a little bit about her own weight struggles and how the media had made her out to, when she was thinner, to be ill, but when she was bigger, like, oh my God, she's gained so much weight. And this is what she said, and I won't use an accent because that's not nice, but I love her accent. You got to understand, this is my second unconference, and both times I've said I love accents. I could give less of a shit what people say about my weight. Here's the thing about weight, though. If it's wrapped in shame, that's where the work we need to do needs to get done. I'm going to say something now. I think it's profound. You might not. Just because I am more than does not mean I am less than. Can I say that again? Because I really think it's pretty good, right? It's pretty good. Just because I am more than bracket, some arbitrary number that somebody determined that I should be, does not make me less than. I would love to sit here and tell you that I will never be worried about my weight again, that I'll wear whatever I want, eat whatever I want. That's not exactly true, but what I can tell you unequivocally, I no longer have shame attached to my size. And I did for for a good long time. I've been a bigger girl since junior high school, so like grade 8, grade 9. Almost my whole existence. Now, through that period, I've been smaller, and through this period, I've been bigger. But one thing that I always struggled with until the last couple of years is the shame attached to size. I can tell you that it got in the way of my leadership because I had a lie that my brain told my heart, and my heart believed that it'll keep people away. I need to keep people away. That's what my size is. Stay away, stay away. You can't build relationships that way. If you have that mindset that your size keeps people at bay, you can't build relationships. How do you have a team, a leadership team, without relationships? How do you build a school culture without the cornerstone of relationship building? Now, I've also written in the past about my alcohol addiction, and I've been sober, I think it was 16 years in July. What I didn't acknowledge for a really long time, that my first addiction was, of course, to food, right? I didn't have the same outcomes with food that I did with drinking. And if you can imagine, I'm not going to go into lots of detail, a young woman, alcoholic, not sure of her sexual orientation, what she did all the time she was drunk with men. Like, we're not going to go too much into detail. When I have a bag of family-sized chips, that behavior does not happen. But I still had the guilt, the shame, the low self-worth attached to what I put into my body. I can tell you that I went to the Lindt chocolate store the other day and bought 150 chocolate balls. Now, not just for me, for the office. And I'm able to keep those now in my office and not eat the entire thing. But even if I have more than I should, whatever that number is, I don't have shame anymore. And most of us are Brene Brown fans, and we know what she says about shame. Right? Shame corrodes the very part of us that believes we are capable of change. Leadership is about changing, growing, evolving. If we're wrapped in shame because of our size, because of the way we feel about our size, how again can we lead? How can we grow? And then how can we help our teams grow? My Facebook memories from 4 years ago shows my school picture that year. In 30 years, I only ever showed my school picture when I was thin. So that's a lot of school pictures that I didn't show. And I put it up there because I like that picture. And I really like this year's picture even more. I'm digging the long hair. It doesn't mean I don't still watch. My damn doctor says my sugar's too high. So I do have to watch because I don't want to be on no needles. So I do have to watch. There's a health thing. But if it's a shame or self-worth or self-esteem thing, girl, we need to support each other. You are enough. You are more than enough. And you are worth it. All right, page 2. And I have no idea what time it is. Vivian will probably tell me enough's enough. I came out very late. I look at today's kids in awe. You know, I knew something was different, but I didn't come out until I was in my 30s. And quite coincidentally, not coincidentally, my battle with alcohol, active alcoholism, ended about the same time I acknowledged that I was a lesbian. But here's the thing, I was working in a rural town, came out to a couple of people, but for many years had half conversations with the people that I worked with. Didn't talk about partners or spouses or dating. I wouldn't even talk about TV shows that I was watching in case someone determined it was too gay of a show. I think, and I know that on the panel last night, when we have more diverse leadership teams, we build a stronger culture. We bring more perspective into those leadership teams. And kids may be struggling with their own identity. Maybe they're not as brave as I think they are. They see Miss Hannah is gay. Because if they ask, I tell them. If they're in my office revealing struggle, I tell them. I actually also tell the odd kid about being alcoholic, and have helped many kids along a recovery path. Now, again, Brené Brown says, do not overshare. I don't feel I ever overshare. But every time I tell my truth, the shame, because there's always a bit, there's always, it's like apple crumble. There's just a little bit in the corner of the pan you can't dig out. There's always something there. Ice cream container. You chip it away, because every time I see there's about 25 people. I don't know many of you. What you do with the information that I give you, that's on you. If someone decides to use the information against me or to make me feel like I'm backed into a corner, that's on them. But I know that's what keeps people from working through these obstacles. Now, Ian McClellan. This is pretty small, so I'm just going to read it. Personally, coming out was one of the most important things I've ever done, lifting from my shoulders the millstone of lies that I haven't even realized I was carrying. My God. Those of you who are straight listening are probably, likely, mostly really empathetic. But I don't know if you can get there. I don't know if you can get the feeling lifted when first we come out to ourselves and then we start coming out, and then it's not coming out anymore because it's just who we are. It is remarkable. And again, I bring that to the leadership table, and so would you if it's something that you're wondering about. Part 3. And I wasn't sure how deep I was going to go here. It's been on my mind this past week. In all of my writing, all my blogs, I dip in and out of my journey with mental illness. I do struggle with depression. And for many years, of course, drinking doesn't help depression, but I was also resistant to counseling or to consistent medication. And it had something to do with that feeling that I'm weak or imperfect. Well, of course I'm imperfect. But the shame finally got too much about 4 years ago, like really got too much. And I wasn't doing well at work. And I agreed to be medicated, and I've stayed on medication. But the darkness in my 20s and 30s certainly helped me get to where I am. And I'd like to say I wouldn't change anything, but those of us who've struggled with the darkness, well, we probably would. I did have suicidal ideation and was in the hospital numerous times. And right, wrong, otherwise, you are the first people I've said that out loud to. because I think it's important, because it is something that's in my heart. We had a student attempt suicide this past week at school, and I know other head teachers listening have struggled with the same recently. And it bothered me. It bothered me that a young girl couldn't ask for help, and it bothered me because I didn't. Over and over and over, I didn't. And if you think about, Lisa, how does this connect to leadership? Well, I'm covered in shame. I was covered in shame and low self-worth. I didn't know gay, straight, geez, I even thought maybe bisexual. I don't know what I was. My mom had died just, I think she's been gone 20 years now. Like, I was going through some shit. How could I have led a team? If I was going through that now, what good would I be to my colleagues, to the students, to the parents and general community? I wouldn't. Mental health is so important now. It's on everyone's mind because of COVID, but we really ought to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of others. We are in a service vocation, but we can't serve if we're not well. Now, I mentioned before, if someone listening, and I doubt it, but takes this information and uses it for untoward purposes, that means you're sitting in the cheap seats to me, right? You're in the cheap seats. I consider the women ed community sort of my four square. There's a lot of you in each of the squares. But I am in such a good spot at 52 that I'm comfortable telling people this, because without that journey, I wouldn't be the leader I was. Now, again, there's pieces I might want to redo. Mulligan. But I'm here because of that journey. And I'm able to participate as a global strategic leader. I joke because I'm scared of Vivian, but she's a lovely woman who I was able to meet in person, and I can't wait to meet the rest of the global strategic leaders in person. But to end, we can't live compartmentalized lives. I couldn't live my whole truth if part of my brain shut the little door on, my sexual orientation, or back here, my mental health. We also can't work through those struggles if they're shut off in some part of our brain. If we want to be whole leaders, we need to be whole people, right? If I ever did go out on a date, I am in an admin team and colleague team now where I'd be able to say, I met a really nice woman. I never go anywhere and I don't like online dating. So I don't know how that's ever going to happen. Maybe at the Safeway while I buy my groceries. But anyway, I'm giving to you what's in my heart. Another Indigenous way of knowing and doing and being is when asked to speak, we allow the creator, the universe, our God, however you name the entity that creates all this, to put the words in our heart and then come out of our mouth. I did do a little bit of note taking and a little bit of planning, but I have a challenge for you. What is holding you back? What are you ready to let go? What is in the way of you letting go? From my heart to yours, thank you for listening. I hope you heard something that resonated. And on behalf of GSL, thank you for giving us your Friday night and your Saturday. That's all.
Woo! I feel like I want to sing I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar now, but last time we did that recording, we got told off by Zoom, I think, didn't we, Vivian?
YouTube.
YouTube for copyright with my voice. Who knew it?
Oh, that was fabulous,
It
Lisa.
was, Lisa.
Thank you so much. And when you see the save the chat, Lisa, before we close down, because it's wonderful. There's some amazing comments which you will thoroughly love reading.
So brave, which is our well, you're more than 10% brave, I have to say.
Well, I think every time we're a little bit braver, someone that's really struggling can you know, use a little bit of our courage to be courageous themselves. So
absolutely. And what an amazing whole session that Lisa is closing for us in daring to be different. Way more than 10% braver, Jerry is telling you. The whole final session today has just been so powerful and so resonant for many of us listening. And Sarah Milliken is from the Northeast, Lisa, where I'm from.
Oh.
And Jerry, I'm from Stockton-on-Tees when you were talking about Newcastle, and I empathised completely, totally. Just so, and Kendra's still there, yay! Got a Northeast contingent today. What can we say to close with everybody who's still hanging on in there with us on a Saturday evening? Hello, Lisa. Woo! Woo! This is exciting.
Isn't it? It's been a lovely evening, actually. Listening to so many inspirational people.
And a big shout out to Gemma, who's doing a lot of tweeting for us today and has already got several sessions uploaded onto YouTube, which is wonderful. So go to Women Ed's YouTube channel and you can relive the highlights from last night and today. Maybe not this session, you won't have got this one up yet. What does anybody else want to say to close?
What strikes me is just we have done lots of, you know, we have moved forward, but there is so much still to do. And I think when Liz was talking about that, about the gender pay gap, and Jerry was talking about that, and Lisa, and I think, you know, Women Ed is more important than ever, really, to move that forward.
Absolutely.
I just want to add, Lisa, that was an extraordinary session. And I'm not a crier. I'm not, and most people know that's not really my thing either. But yeah, I did have a little moment. But I thought it was so beautifully honest. And I think, you know, leadership can be a lonely place. And the more we can share and just be honest about what it is to lead and to be, I thought you were incredible. And it was a real privilege to listen to you. And no pressure, everyone who's still here, 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. Luckily, that's 11 a.m. here in Switzerland.
Yes. Tomorrow morning, we have Liz and Kezia hosting, and an array of amazing presenters and speakers. And at lunchtime, we launch our Women Ed edition of the Innovate Journal also. So it's going to be a spectacular Sunday morning. Can't wait.
And I'm really enjoying the chat. Thank you, everyone, for talking in the chat. As Jerry said, you know, I've really enjoyed the comments and discussion in the chats as well as the session. So if we haven't said hello to you or read out your comments, we are reading them, and they've been great. They've really made the event.
And I've just saved the chat, and anybody can do that quickly before we close down if you want to. It's the three dots next to the chat. Lovely. Thank you so much, everybody, from Jules and I. Have a great little bit of what evening you've got left.
Well, Liz has got her glitter on, so she's obviously out partying.
It's all going on here. Like I said, we've got the cows. It's going to be a fun evening here in Switzerland.
We can't wait to see you in the morning. Bye.
Bye. See you in the morning.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.